Shoppers loved the idea of being able to drop their trash off with someone who could then transform it into something.
This is Katy Osborn, and she's built a business that turns trash into art that she can sell, and she's helping other artists do the same.
For example, Jasmine, she made $1,000 at this market.
Her business is called Nowhere Collective. It's a circular economy startup that's reimagining how we deal with the waste that we throw out through community and creativity. And she is laser focused on solving one huge problem.
How do we use creativity and imagination to tackle the waste problem?
In this episode, you'll learn creative ways to test out new business ideas.
The Trashy Markets actually came out of my need to sell my own products, and it was a really cheap way for me to get started.
Why sustainable startups might not always mesh well with venture capital.
It really is about degrowth. It's about doing everything as intentional as possible, and that doesn't line up well when someone's just looking to make their money back.
And how to launch a tech startup as a non-technical founder.
Find your people and, you'll get a lot further than just like sitting in a house and trying to build a thing by yourself.
Tell me a bit about Nowhere Collective, because from what I have seen, there's sort of two parts of the business. There's the online upcycling marketplace, and then there is the in-person sort of trashy markets that have kind of a full circular element to them. So can you tell me a bit about both of those?
I got started making my own art and goods from reclaimed materials and was realizing there wasn't a place for me to sell these that was attracting the audience that I was looking for. So I started to imagine this online marketplace almost 3 years ago, and was doing kind of the tech startup thing, trying to figure out like, how do I launch one of these without completely going in the hole, or venture capital never really felt like the right fit for me. So figuring out how to bootstrap something was really difficult when you're launching a tech product. So the Trashy Markets actually came out of my need to sell my own products. And it was a really cheap way for me to get started. I've done in-person events in the past, so it felt really comfortable for me to try it. And then I started to meet other makers who were doing a similar thing with reclaimed materials, just upcycling stuff they have found either in the alleys or thrift shops or just sourcing from friends and family. So December 2022 is when I launched the Trashy Markets, and it was really fun. And so 2023 was really like the year of the Trashy Markets. I committed pretty much the whole year to doing that. But it was really a pilot. It was kind of a validation tool for me to see, is there an audience for these goods? Are makers excited to be in community with each other? Is it important for us to be selling in one place? The Trashy Markets started, but then I sort of have always had this nagging feeling of like, okay, but there's still this space online that, there's nowhere to do it. How do we translate this idea online? And so the marketplace is in the works, and have now come to kind of really visually understanding like, what is the user experience with this, and how do we make it feel like it's not just a better version of Etsy?
What were those early versions of the Trashy Markets like? I know you said you were using them as sort of a validation tool, but could you tell me a bit about like what kind of happened there, who showed up, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So there's a distillery near my house. Koval Distillery was really excited to host our market. So it was a free venue for me to get started. We basically just filled every nook and cranny of the venue that we could. It was a very mutually beneficial event because people came to drink, and then people buy more when they're drinking. And so it was a great start. And really, it was like inviting makers who were local to Chicago, just finding them on Instagram and Etsy, trying to track people down who were doing this, and then putting the word out that, hey, there's a call for artists. If you are doing upcycling, like, you're invited to join us. And so there were about 18 makers who came for that first one. Everyone just brought a table. I mean, we were very collaborative, helping each other with any kind of setup needs they might have. A lot of the makers, actually, this was their first market that they'd ever done. And they were excited to like try it out with us because it felt like a really good fit. So the marketing, that's kind of my background. I was really comfortable with putting together a marketing plan. But really, it was like a lot of kind of word of mouth, foot traffic, people who come to Kaval. There was just an energy in the room with both the makers and the shoppers, just really geeking out on people being able to use trash and the way they transformed it.
And so now you are working on this digital marketplace. You had mentioned that you're sort of bootstrapping a technical product as a non-technical person. How
Mm-hmm.
has that gone, and how are you actually bootstrapping something as a non-technical person?
Yeah, that's why it's taking me so long to figure this out. I mean, there's two sides of it. Financing it is really difficult when I'm not interested in venture capital, like not really interested in the traditional tech funding route. I'm interested in becoming a co-op, treating this like a co-op. The makers are interested in transforming this into a co-op so that we're all really seeing the benefit of our mutual success. And I have worked with a couple different UI UX designers to help me kind of put my brain on paper, figure out what that user experience looks like. And then I'm now working with a firm that's helping me work through a lot of the customer discovery piece. So I've done many interviews. I have talked to so many makers, and really truly understanding their pain points has helped me feel really confident about moving forward with this.
That makes sense. And I think the more folks that I talk to, especially in the impact and sustainability space, they are more and more not necessarily not looking for VC money, but just looking for alternative ways to fund. Because along with, you know, any sort of large investment typically comes with the expectation of that more hockey stick growth. And I would
Yeah.
argue that your co-op or collective approach to funding this venture is, yes, going to be a little bit slower, but probably going to be a bit more sustainable because people are bought into the mission, they're bought into the community, and they're bought into the product. So they're more likely to stay, through the ebbs and flows of the business.
Yeah, and the people who really believe in this idea are people who want to tell as many people as possible. So, I have found that word of mouth is key to the trashy markets, and I'm hoping that it's the same for an online product, so that this is. I mean, that's really where product market fit is going to happen. I mean, once we get the people who use it and love it, the idea is that those who are supplying materials to these makers become ambassadors for these products and these makers, and then it just becomes its own marketing. I think by bringing everyone in, shoppers, suppliers, makers, having everyone participate in the circular economy together, it just creates this investment in each other, an investment in the community to make it work. And it's, kind of goes back to the original version of social media platforms where you're just there because it's fun and exciting and creative, and everybody's just like loving on each other, and we're doing good at the same time.
And I think that the more people that you get bought into the mission and the more different, say, diverse stakeholders you have in the business, the more opportunities you have for that alternative type of funding. Like, you're developing a marketplace. The traditional path of a marketplace is probably to take some sort of commission. But since you are, in my mind, building something a bit bigger than a marketplace, you have the opportunity to harness some sort of community that people may be willing to pay for, or a membership that people may be willing to pay for, or a subscription. So it sounds like from a bootstrapping perspective, there's the funding side. Like, a lot of this stuff just costs money, and it's usually built on other SaaS products. So it's a monthly cost for how long you build it, and a technical side. You have to find the right people that are probably bought into the mission in order to help you build the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have been on the search for a technical co-founder for a long time. I know that it would work a lot better, a lot faster if I had someone else who could speak that language and could really build it in a way that, kind of avoids a lot of the major pitfalls that many non-technical founders fall into. I'm using as many resources as I can from accelerators and incubators and mentors, people who know what they're doing, just to make sure that I'm kind of following best practices and not really like falling into a pit that I didn't see coming.
Have you thought about or have you participated in any sort of more formal program from an incubator to an accelerator?
Yeah, so at the start, when I first was concepting Nowhere Collective, and went through the Founders Institute, and I got as much out of it as I could. It was really helpful to kind of hear how other people talk about these things. I don't know if I was a really good fit for the program because I was tech enabled, but very loosely. And so there was a lot that wasn't for me. And then it got to the point where it was basically like, you are all in on your idea, and then Founders Institute will sort of take a cut of, some equity in your business, or you get out. I was like, okay, I'm out. And so that was my first experience with a program like that. Then I jumped into 1871, which is the kind of tech hub here in Chicago. They have a lot of different programs, but they have kind of the I forget what they call it, but it's sort of like the ideation stage where you're with a bunch of other founders. They have an advisor or mentor role who walks you through like what you need to be thinking about when you're building a tech company. That was helpful, but again, it was like, I'm paying to be there. It was a monthly kind of membership, I guess. And then by the end of that, felt like still wasn't totally the right fit. And I really needed to be around other people who were in the climate space. I felt like I needed some other guidance in more like on the sustainability side. So then I joined CrowdSolve, and they were more on the climate side, still tech focused. And that was, again, really helpful. It was just nice to hear from other people, like, how are you doing this? And what questions should I ask? And then this past January was when I started Next Cycle in Michigan, and they are purely circular economy focused businesses based in Michigan, not necessarily tech businesses. Actually, most of them are more on the production side. And that was a very competitive application process. And so I was one of 12, I think, that got in, and very intensive kickoff program, weekly meetings with mentors. So I just finished that last month. And so that was like, it's kind of grabbing as much as I can from as many areas as possible. And I have found like really being in space with others who are doing this is when I like make the most progress on my business and like start to understand how do I talk about it so that people understand? And then how do I know what the next move is that's going to really make this a sustainable business?
You had mentioned that being in the spaces these people provides a lot of the forward progress in your business. Is that because of the accountability? Is that just because you're talking about this thing all the time? How does being in the same space as other creators or as other founders get you to make that much more progress on your business?
Accountability is huge. I mean, when I'm as a solo entrepreneur doing this mostly by myself, making decisions on my own, and really being focused on a singular task. As a creative person, that's extremely difficult for me. I like to just do a lot of things, and I have a lot of projects happening all at the same time. And I know that can slow me down because I'm not giving one thing 100%. So when I'm in an accelerator, it really forces me to focus on as few things as possible. It's never just one thing. But I like having someone else ask me, like, what is your plan for the next week? And then I'll say the thing out loud to a person, and whether they're not going to punish me if I don't, but it definitely keeps me on track. Also, this Next Cycle program, they really did have the right mentors, the right experts they could bring in at the critical moments that I needed them. And having those people really help me hone in on like, how does this work financially? What are my projections over the next 5 years? How do I talk about that to a person that is financially minded? That was pretty huge for me and gave me a lot of confidence that like this business can work if I set up these milestones in this way. So I would say, yeah, there's part of like just being around other people who can answer questions that you can't just Google, but also just like helping me stay really focused on a task.
And I would imagine it sounds like you've been in 4 different types of programs. It seems to me that the one that is a bit more niche down, even if you're working with other founders that are more in production, or I would imagine like raw materials or things like that, it would still be really helpful because you're all tackling a similar problem. And the diversity of founders within that niche is probably also a net benefit because you could probably find people that would help your business.
Yeah, actually, so CrowdSolve, which is climate focused, I found really helpful in some aspects, but then there were also moments where it was people from around the globe, and there was still sort of like a time spent on just explaining the problem to each other so that we could help each other figure out where to go next. So I was inspired by it, but I'm not sure it really leveled me up in a way that I was hoping it would. To have next cycle be very specific industry wise, circular economy focused, but also Michigan, Midwest, it was like, oh, we all understand this problem so deeply because we live it every single day. There was something about kind of like the geography based and the kind of industry focused combination that just made it a program that I'm not sure it exists anywhere else.
If you liked this conversation, then I think you would love the Good Fortune newsletter. Each week, I share new impact businesses from around the world and give you a playbook breaking down the strategies they use to start and scale their operation. In these newsletters, you'll discover new trends and businesses that are changing the world for good. Learn from the impact founders who are on the ground every day building these businesses. And get actionable tips for launching and growing your own impact business. Click the link below to learn more, and while you're down there, you can like and subscribe to this channel so you can catch each conversation as soon as it gets released. Your support means the world to me, and it helps this channel find new people and inspire new businesses that are good for people and planet. Thanks for watching, and now back to the episode.
I know that the business has gone through a handful of pivots, and I was curious if you can kind of just walk me through where the original idea started and what type of pivots you went through in order to get to this version of Nowhere Collective.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a ride. I started ideating on this when my daughter was 3.5. So we were sort of in that time in life where we were going around to all the play spaces, trying to figure out how to keep her entertained. Here in Chicago, there are many kind of physical play spaces to take a kid. And walking into these places, I was feeling very like underwhelmed by the creativity, which you'd think like when you're talking about children, like these places could be a lot more imaginative. But then I'd go into like children's museums and I would just be in awe of how imaginative they are and be really inspired by what they put together. And, they have a lot more funding, obviously. So I felt like there was an opportunity for creating a space for children that was more educational about sustainability, but in a really fun, creative way, using reclaimed materials. That was the initial idea. And then it evolved into more of like a museum for anybody. So these immersive museums that were really hot in 2019, kind of the Wonder Museum was the big one here. I read about Meow Wolf in Santa Fe and just went gaga over it. I just felt like it was the most incredible story that they put together, but to do it in a physical space was just really new at the time. At one point, it was going to be like a trash pickup, like a junk removal company. And I was like, what if we remove junk from people's houses and then we find the people who can repurpose that stuff? And we're really like, connecting materials with makers. then it was like, okay, that's a lot too. I'm not sure if I really want to be a junk removal business. So I started just making my own clothing. And then I was like, okay, this is fun, but where do I sell it? And the handmade markets here in Chicago that I did find that had kind of a bigger audience, it was like $350 to participate. And I just thought, like, as my first market, I can't really justify that. So I wanted to make something that was for me, but affordable for others. And that was when the first Trashy Market started. And then, kind of really getting to the point, like, is this the business? Is this actually going to be what I want to do for a long, long time? And this marketplace concept is the thing that keeps like hanging over my head, and like that little nagging feeling in the back of my mind, like there's an opportunity here and nobody's doing it. Still looking around, just like, is anybody doing this? Does anybody have like a truly circular marketplace for makers, and feeling like there's not anyone really filling that gap yet. And so it starts to more and more kind of grow into this, like, I need to do this. I need to know if this is actually the business, and be aware that there might be a day where I say, like, okay, this isn't actually going to work.
Yeah, and looking back on it, it's probably like, in retrospect, it's probably pivoted majorly once, but there are
Mm-hmm.
little decisions that you have to make every day that
Yeah.
change the trajectory of the business.
Yeah.
Um, and I really love your focus on the mission and problem space, and having that be the consistent through line through all of the different variations of what this business has been over the
Yeah.
years, because that's the thing that you want to stick with, right? The business might look a little bit different, the solution might look a little bit different, and in terms of, an online marketplace, physical marketplace, community, collective, the mechanism for trying to solve that problem might look a little bit different, but the
Yeah.
mission's ultimately the same.
Yeah.
You had mentioned in one of the programs that you were in that there was this point where you kind of had to make a decision and say, if I am to go forward, then this company or organization is going to take some equity from my company. And you ultimately decided not to move forward and to kind of keep going off on your own. Can you just talk through a bit of what you were thinking about when you were facing that decision of, do I give some bit of my company away forever?
Part of it was fit. I mean, the group I was a part of, the Founders Institute, the way they modeled their programming didn't sit well with me. It felt very much like your traditional venture capital, where they're going to take on 10 businesses and know that one's going to work, and they'll have one success out of 10, and that's enough, and that's how they keep funding themselves. And it doesn't feel like we're in this together. It just kind of feels a little extractive. And so for me, being so early on in the ideation phase too, I was just like, I don't know exactly what this is. And so for someone to have any bit of control over the future of this, just, I wasn't in a place where I was prepared to give someone that. I've always felt like the collective piece is as important as the trash piece, like being a cooperative, being in a collaborative environment with others who are invested in this. The people who are going to build this are going to be people who are participating in the circular economy, and they very much weren't that. And then more recently, kind of seeing another circular economy business here based in Chicago, who's sort of the B2B version of what I'm doing. They did take venture capital, and they are facing extremely difficult decisions. They are having to answer to their board in a way that, from my perspective, feels really uncomfortable. When we're working on the circular economy, it really is about degrowth. It's about, not consuming and doing everything as intentional as possible. And that doesn't line up well when someone's just looking to make their money back. So the equity piece has been very tricky for me. And the part that I still am not super clear on is like, what are the alternative forms of funding here? Because it feels like there's nonprofit grants, and there's venture capital, sort of angel investor, with the expectation that you're going to exit in some way. There's this group called Exit to Community that's in the middle, and they're trying to figure out some standards for how do you actually exit to the people who help you build it. Not technically a co-op. They really want, like, let's pretend Etsy exited to the makers. The makers would then help. They'd own a piece of it. They'd run it. But there's very little legal, precedent for that. The SEC doesn't know what that looks like. Like, who's kind of creating the regulations around that? So it's not set up yet for this to actually work. Blockchain has kind of figured out, like, maybe there's a way to do it, but then you're in that world and you're kind of not, it's hard to straddle the blockchain built business and the conventional websites that we now are used to.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of, bootstrapping a technical business as a non-technical person, if you're adding in another layer of building a DAO to possibly own this thing collectively and help govern it collectively, then it's just another layer of technicality and complexity that you may or may not want to be injecting in your business. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe you can be the Green Bay Packers of the circularity industry, like owned by the members.
Yeah, actually, I have been a part of another kind of accelerator-ish. It was more of like a workshop series for co-ops, startups who want to be co-ops. In my mind, I was like, well, co-ops, like, how do you, like, lawyers have to help me do this, and how do I put together paperwork to make this a thing? And the thing I learned from them was just start behaving like a co-op, and then you'll figure it out. Like, you need to just start getting people on board with the idea of being a co-op, and then you can hire the attorneys and they can make it all formal and official and put the paperwork together. But I was like, I can just start having people participate in this with the expectation that eventually we'll get to the point where we all get to, reap the benefits. That was really helpful for me. Like, and that's kind of how I've been rolling with it the whole time, is like, I just start behaving like we're this and that, and pretending like I know what I'm doing, and finding the people to help me do it. And it's fun for me. I enjoy that.
It probably makes sense on two fronts. Like, one, a mindset of a collective or a mindset of a population is probably harder to change than actually building the legal mechanisms of, okay, how do you get distributed ownership? And to those types of people that are doing it before all the legality and ownership gets figured out are probably the right type of early adopters, because their intention is to be a part of something bigger than the sum of its parts, And so you kind of are like self-selecting or self-filtering for the right people up front before you figure out all the legal stuff.
Yeah. The paperwork could scare people away. And right now it's really just like let's figure this out together and make decisions as a group and see where it takes us.
I'm curious for the state of the business right now. Like, what's the biggest challenge or what's the biggest thing that you're working on?
The online marketplace version has also evolved, and I've gone through a few different iterations of that. The first couple were based on like these no-code templates that exist in the world for marketplaces. It never really felt like it was doing the job that we needed it to do. There were too many constraints in the template. So I dropped that idea for a bit. And then coming out of this year of Trashy Markets, and at this last Trashy Market, we invited shoppers to bring materials to the makers. So it was the first kind of truly circular market. Shoppers loved the idea of being able to drop their trash off with someone who could then transform it into something. And then they got to see like what it turns into. And then they supported these makers. For example, Jasmine, who collected yarn and bubble wrap and beads at the market, She makes kind of wall hangings out of this stuff. And she made $1,000 at this market just because people got to bring her stuff. They loved her. They felt like they wanted to support her. So she sold way more than she sold at any other market. So seeing that, I was like, this is working. And then really feeling like if we had something online, not just a Google sheet to organize this, and then those people who brought those materials get to be acknowledged by the maker when they sell the finished good, and they get to be a part of the story of this product, and we get to track these materials in a way that not only lets us measure how much trash we're using, but it also builds the story, and then everyone truly feels like they're participating. I was like, I need to just make the thing that I have in my mind. And I got a founder friend of mine recommended a firm. And so they've been helping me like really walk through the process of like, here's how you build this thing from scratch. And so we have a prototype now that we're testing with users that it's hit a really special note with them. Like just seeing how they get to give kudos to the people who contribute. The contributors get to feel that warm acknowledgement and then get to share how they contributed. It's the material circulation, but it's also this like social love of circularity that like really makes the product special. So it's great to see it. The prototype is awesome. The design is amazing. It's a project though. A custom build is very expensive. And so my biggest challenge is like, okay, if we get enough people to love this, how do we kind of build the first version of this that people can actually download and start using that, yeah, we can actually afford to make.
But I think this is a really good approach to building this thing. And oftentimes, going back to the bootstrapping or VC decision, one of the benefits of bootstrapping is that you don't always have the luxury of a pool of money to go throw at building something that you haven't yet validated. And so the fact that you are building and validating incrementally before you actually invest in developing the full product or scaling that product if you've built some part of it is a really smart way to go. So I think in this instance, bootstrapping has probably played to your advantage.
Yeah, and the Trashy Market's become a marketing tool for me. So a lot of tech companies don't really have this core base of people in real life who I can sit in a room with and talk to and brainstorm and troubleshoot with. And so, if we do build this product, the go-to-market strategy is like through these in-person markets, and then the word of mouth is a bit easier. So I can see where the Trashy Markets still live on, but they aren't the core business. They really are the marketing tool, and that's how we grow this community by community.
You've been doing this for a number of years now. Maybe we can wrap up on any piece of advice you would give someone who is interested in doing something good for people and planet, but hasn't quite started yet, or has maybe had a couple of false starts. Any advice that you would give them?
If you don't love the process of building and exploring and learning, then it's going to be a struggle. I really enjoy the research side of things. I really enjoy tinkering and figuring out and solving the problem. And I have learned to not get attached to a solution. So by being able to say, like, let's try this, and then just be honest with ourselves if this is working or not. On the flip side, like not giving up after it doesn't work. First Trashy Market was awesome. The second one was kind of a flop. The third one was amazing. The fourth one was canceled. The fifth one was not great. It was okay. But then this last one we had was a blockbuster. And so really taking the time to learn lessons from each one, and doing it over and over again and kind of like trying to be as intentional about how many variables we change so that the next time we can say like, okay, well, that part of it didn't work. Making them bigger doesn't necessarily make them better. So, I think being committed to an idea to the point where you can learn as much stuff as possible, but not being so married to it that you can't let go eventually if it's really not working.
I do think that falling in love with not necessarily the problem space, but just the mission that you're on, and be willing to learn, fail forward, continually feel like you have something to do or have another thing that needs to be tackled, and having a bit of the self-awareness to say, I'm going to block my time and make incremental improvement on this idea, rather than burning myself out, is probably a good way to go.
I will say I don't have to do it alone. So, while I'm the sole owner of this, I'm not alone in it. And so if you can find others who care about it as much as you do, it just makes that failing bit and the success bit a lot more enjoyable, and it keeps me motivated and encouraged. Yeah, find your people, and you'll get a lot further than just like sitting in a house and trying to build a thing by yourself.
And I think that Nowhere Collective really benefits from that, because all of the stakeholders in the business are bought into this community. And what really excites me about this business is that if everybody's bought into the idea, then everybody wants to see it succeed. And then you don't necessarily have to rely on outside funding or convincing someone else to give you money in order to prop up this business, because everybody that's involved with it, from the consumer to the makers to you and your literal family that is helping you out with each of these events, is all bought into the idea and seeing that idea through and making that idea succeed.
If you liked this conversation, then I think you would love the Good Fortune newsletter. Each week, I share new impact businesses from around the world and give you a playbook breaking down the strategies they use to start and scale their operation. In these newsletters, you'll discover new trends and businesses that are changing the world for good. Learn from the impact founders who are on the ground every day building these businesses, and get actionable tips for launching and growing your own impact business. Click the link below to learn more, and while you're down there, you can like and subscribe to this channel so you can catch each conversation as soon as it gets released. Your support means the world to me, and it helps this channel find new people and inspire new businesses that are good for people and planet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.